I got it. I think so. Can you hear me, everybody? No?
Is it here red?
Just red, yeah?
Yeah,
Must come up a little bit. There we go.
You can also take this one.
Okay. That better? Hello. Okay. Hello. Wow. Good morning. Good morning. I'll call us all to order. I know how harm reductionists can be hard to gather together and focus now. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tony Duffin. I am the chair of the advisory committee of Correlation European Harm Reduction Network. It is a great privilege to be here with you all. I'm a focal point for, or represent Anna Liffey Drug Project, which is the focal point for Ireland. So that's my other role within C-EHRN, within Correlation. I'm just going to share a little bit about this morning and then a bit of a reflection. Just to say it is wonderful to be in Budapest with so many friends and colleagues and like-minded people. I just want to tell you a little bit. We are live streaming this event this morning, the plenary sessions, and I'd like to give you a little taste of what's to come. So in terms of the plenary sessions at least, We've got the whelping and opening session now, and Katrin will join us in a moment and give us a little overview around correlation activities and results for the year. At 9:50 we have our keynote speech from Péter Sárosi. Looking forward to that one. The keynote speech will address the challenges and highlight some opportunities ahead of the harm reduction movement in Europe. At 10 past 10. Outline the current drug policy situation in Hungary, address the ethical dilemmas of civil society in a hostile political climate, and present some survival strategies. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. Then there's a little break. After that break, we have civil society monitoring and data collection plenary session, and Rafaela will be leading us on that. Short presentations focusing on key messages will be provided by the authors, followed by a Q&A session. And then the final plenary session later on at 12:20, we have civil society involvement case studies around harm reduction in prison, correlation activities, civil society involvement case studies, harm reduction in prison, advocacy, drug consumption rooms, harm reduction and gender. So I'm sure you're all looking forward to that. In terms of some reflections on my part, this morning, certainly to say to you that obviously I believe that harm reduction works. I know what it's like to feel isolated as a harm reductionist, and I think that remembering that harm reduction works is important. And these meetings are important to us to come together and commune as people who work in a particular field, which isn't always agreed with. And that will be to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the jurisdiction you come from. I hope that when my colleagues from Budapest, Hungary, and across Europe leave here, that your agency is topped up. Your capacity to have the power and resources to fulfill your potential in whatever you are working on back at home is refreshed. And that's the importance of coming here and being together. This is a great network, a network of really pragmatic people, and I hope that you really do engage with each other. And when you get back and you've got these connections that you've made, and you know the way we all go onto Zoom or Teams and we have structured meetings and such, and we make sure that we have an agenda. I don't know about you, but I find it really helpful to just make a call to somebody that I know via Zoom, like dropping into the office next door and having a chat with them. Try and do that. Try and be together in other ways. Use that technology. We are a European network. We're not down the road from each other. So use the technology to really engage with each other and bounce ideas off each other. That will be a fantastic outcome. because obviously, remember, as I said to you before, harm reduction works. We are currently finalising CERN's correlations strategic plan for the next number of years, and this will be comprehensive and transformative. I'm here with it in my hand, and we're looking at it later on. So later on in the days to come. So I think that co-production will be really important. I think that this is the idea of co-design and co-delivery of our projects and initiatives. As a harm reduction network, we have a fantastic network of organisations engaged with people who use drugs across Europe, and this is one of our strengths and an opportunity for this network. So working with people, I'm talking about living experience. Nothing against lived experience, but it's something that is not utilised in many jurisdictions as well as it could be. The idea of working and with people who use drugs currently and getting their expertise and knowledge across into policy. Did I mention that harm reduction works? Well, it does. So we will continue at Correlation in terms of our delivering our strategy with empathy, the understanding of another's situation, and with compassion. We will do it informed by evidence, not evidence-based, but informed by evidence. The idea that we will make the evidence as well, and we will do it, as I said, by it being formed by living experience. So that really is, to me, our shared culture and ethos, the idea of empathy, being informed by evidence, and being informed by living experience. So remember that, and really go away, I hope, from today's event as members, focal points, as experts in harm reduction, with agency, and with the understanding that harm reduction works, and go use the network, get to know each other better, and go back believing that harm reduction works. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Katrin to pop up. Yeah, good. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, good morning. So wonderful to be here. So for those who don't know me, my name is Katrin Schiffer. I'm Director of Correlation, and I'm really pleased to welcome you here in beautiful Budapest and in this lovely venue. I know that some of you had really trouble coming here because of the weather. We also, I'm falling. We also have some people who unfortunately will not be able to join, but happily most of you made it here. After me, we will have a short video speech from the Deputy Mayor. And I'm actually very happy that we have, at least he could not join in person, but still he is with us and speaking to us, and I think it means a lot what I understand, or what you all know, the situation in Hungary in terms of drug policy and harm reduction is extremely difficult, and it is great to hear that at least at local level we have, or Budapest has a very good mayor and deputy mayor who support harm reduction, and I think this is great. I also would like to thank now in the beginning already the colleagues Péter Sárosi and István Takács from the Rights Reporter Foundation, who really helped in organizing this meeting. They did put a lot of effort and work in organizing this and helping us to find all the venues and the places, the hotels and everything. And they also contributed a lot by streaming and by making videos and so on. And also to the Central Eastern European Unions, those who haven't been here yet yesterday, but it's really a wonderful venue, and I would wish that every city where we come would have such a place. They offered this place to us for a really very good price, and they're very supportive, and it's great being here. So, who is here today? We are around 130 people, at least this is what we the That's an impressive number, I would say, for a meeting, because it's a work meeting of correlation. It's not necessarily a conference. But it's also a great number, because I know most of you, and it's a great community, and I'm really proud to be here with you. And Tony already told and said harm reduction works, but I think it also works because we have a great community and many people who make it work. We have around 40 focal points also joining the meeting. They met already yesterday and had a nearly whole day of meeting talking about the process of this year, and also talking about and discussing how we can continue in 24. We have a lot of other members, experts, consultants who contribute to our work, who contributed this year to our work and hopefully also in the next year. We have the members of the advisory committee and our amazing chair, Tony Duffin, who you already met. And they help us in formalizing and formulating the strategy, but also in implementing and developing plans and work. We also have the members of the Scientific Advisory Board, also met yesterday, and they are extremely important for us because they help us for all kind of research activities we are doing, and especially what in regards to monitoring. And last but not least, we also have 2 projects represented here, actually 3 projects, but one is coordinated by us, it's a BOOST project. And we also have project partners of the CEMIT EU project and the drug prep project. John Peter will tell later on one minute something about the project, but there will be sessions in the afternoon for all 3 projects, and you need to decide where you go, but I think all 3 are even important or interesting. And we also have a number of local participants, and it's great to have them here, and there will be the session afterwards here where we discuss the situation in Hungary and Budapest. And we also have our team, the correlation team. Some of you might have seen that we have increased, that we do have a young and fresh and fruity team, and so probably when I say the names, you stand up for those who don't know you. I mean, everyone knows Roberto, Rafa, and Iga. So you stand up and show your face. Roberto, Iga, Rafa. We have new colleagues from the research team. It's Lisha over there. And also Alice, who unfortunately can't join the meeting. So Alice, we are with you, and you are with us, hopefully. And we also have Ari and Joanna. Ari in the back. And Joanna in the meeting. Very good, very good. Hannah, she's our communication officer. Georg, who coordinates the BOOST project. Good. And Lea and Steph, most of you should know them. Get up, get up. I think they did a great work in organizing everything, and you know, if everything goes wrong, always contact them. So, and Eva, she's our support for the financial and administration. Exactly, Eva is providing us with a lot of guidance and structure, what we hardly need. So, and now I will shortly show you a bit about what we have been doing. Some of you might have seen that we look differently. We changed our logo, we changed our identity and our branding, and this is mainly the work of Roberto, Hannah, and Ari, who really did a lot of work together with Jesus, who made the layout. And I think it looks very good. It looks very young and very fresh. We have different shapes. We have a circle. We have a polygon and a polygon. And so, what stands the circle for? It's the concept of community and inclusiveness. And the polygon acknowledges the diversity of our network and the harm reduction community. And together, this illustrates how super our network is, and how. And I think again, it looks good. What I think, this is the new logo. It's a hug. Yeah? You can see it's a hug. So people are. It's colorful, warm, and we also prepared, and I think this is really wonderful, we have different logos. So we have a logo for our focal points, which our focal points can also use to for their own publications if they want to share it on their letters. We have one for the European Network on Drug Consumption Rooms. And all this, I think, will be shared very soon with Hannah, with everyone who is willing to use it. So if you have, for example, a link on your website, it would be great if you use the new logo. So now the website. We are working on launching the website, hopefully until the end of the year. This has been an exhausting process, I would say. We started already last year, and it has been ups and downs, but we are nearly there. The nice thing about the website is it will not only be a website, but it will also be an online resource center, and the tagging system, very complicated one to develop, it seems, will allow you to really look for content by using different tags and by using different filtering systems. And once up, I'm sure you will all enjoy it. We also will link resources to the projects, for our projects, but also for other projects. If you think something would be good to share through our website, please let us know and share your content. And we can also, member organizations are listed on our website. So if you do have content which you would like to share with us, we can put it in here and you could share it with us. And I think this is a wonderful tool which can also be used by you and for your publications and so on. So the network, I really will be short and quick, but I want to share what we have been doing in this year, because it was really a lot we have been doing. We worked on the strategic plan. We are still not finalized. We did a member consultation. IGA did the member consultation, and there was a gem board shared, and many of you shared their input. There will also be a session tomorrow morning, where you can provide additional input. We will then also, if you think you would like to provide input after the meeting, that's possible. And we hope to finalize the strategy until spring next year. So, yeah. About the monitoring, I will not go too much in detail because there will be a whole session after this one, and not directly, but after that. But what is important for you to know probably is that we really extended and intensified the quality also of the research activities, also because we do have a really strong team. So next to the research team, which you already saw just now, we also have Tuka and Dan, who really support us for the hepatitis C and also for the new drug trends. The focal points, I think 16 focal points also organized focus group discussions this year. This has been also a new tool which has been used with lots of good and rich data. We organized a separate focal point meeting in the beginning of the year, which was also, I think, very useful for the focal points to share their views and their experiences and to discuss different things. And we also prepare a report on mental health among harm reduction workers. And we did city reports. I just mentioned this because you will hear about it more later on. Then we have done we have worked on different thematic priorities, not new ones necessarily, but drug consumption rooms has been one of the topics we have been investing a lot of in. So we set up the European Network of Drug Consumption Rooms. We shared quite extensive survey among organizations running a DCR and they provided us with input, and this will be published in the beginning of next year. We also organized together with the EMCDDA technical meeting in March this year. And Roberto and Ari organized 2 in-service trainings, one in Slovenia and one in the Czech Republic. And I think this shows that there is a lot of need among organizations developing and implementing DCRs on how to do it, and also to intensify our advocacy work here. We also continued our work in regard to harm reduction in prison. We did work already in 21, 22, and this year we will develop a toolkit. Graham Shaw, where is Graham? Graham is there in the back. He will present it later on as well, and I think this will be a very interesting toolkit which will be hopefully extended next year. Oops, sorry. And let me see, so much work. And we work together with Unite, with a parliamentarian network on global health. Where's Beatrix? There is Beatrix. And we did organize 2 consultations, one on migration and drug use, one on drug consumption rooms as well among members, to identify needs and challenges and to organize advocacy activities or needs. And there will be also reports published in the beginning of next year. And last but not least, together with Péter Sárosi from the Rights Reporter Foundation, we organized 4 civil society involvement case studies in 4 countries. I will not talk more about it because also Peter will present something about this later on. So, member and expert meeting for us is now a little bit a closing event for this year, and I think it's also, we all meet in between through Zoom and through all kind of other meetings. I always feel very excited about these kind of meetings because it is more than just sitting together and exchanging information. I always have the feeling, yesterday at the bar, for example, that there is a warm community and it's really, it feels a bit like family, friends, and this is super. So, short outlook for the next year. We are still in the process of securing funding, so unfortunately this is nothing else. But as always, we are very optimistic, so I'm quite sure we will succeed. And for the next year, we will organize, hopefully, a European Harm Reduction Conference in Warsaw next year. So it will also be, it is planned for the first week of December, from 2 till 4 December. So already block the dates in your agenda. And there we will have time to meet again. But now first we go to this meeting. Some housekeeping issues. I think Tony already told a lot about the program. I will not talk a lot about that anymore. Just one thing, those who are covered by us in terms for expenses, please deliver your boarding passes to Steph and Leah. It's important because otherwise we get problems with the reporting. We already said that this session will be streamed, also the Wednesday morning plenary session will be streamed, and the CSI case study session this afternoon. We are also making photos and interviewing people. If someone of you doesn't like to be in a photo, it would be good to announce it later on, probably to staff. But I hope all of you are fine with it, and in principle it will be mainly portraits of people, but also there might be some photos where you are on. Lunch will be served here, so you have seen if you are in front of the reception, there is these weird glass doors which are not open now, but for lunch they will be opened. It will also be the coffee break there, and there will be a reception with finger food tonight here directly after the meeting. So at 5:30, so no need to go to the hotel and fresh up. You can directly stay here. And I think this is it for me for now. I will close this now. and open the video from the deputy mayor, and I hope it works. Looks good.
Dear participants of the Harm Reduction Conference in Budapest, please allow me to welcome you on behalf of the city of Budapest. First of all, let me express my sincere regret for not being able to attend this very important conference in person. As you might know, the climate in Hungary is quite hostile both to NGOs and the harm reduction approach, but the Budapest administration is open and supportive of both of them. We firmly believe that the knowledge and experience of experts should be relied on even in value-based policies, including on substance abuse. We are convinced that law enforcement measures to reduce supply should focus on distributors and dealers, but we do not believe that complete drug-free status is likely to be achieved. As responsible city leaders, in such a situation, our primary task is to raise awareness of the drug phenomenon. In addition to harm reduction, there is a need for health improvement, promotion of fact-checked, reliable information, targeted prevention, and the provision of appropriate and accessible treatment options. We need to demonstrate to the community of Budapest that harm reduction programs not only make drug users safer for drug users, and possibly save lives thereby, but also make the environment in which they live safer for other city dwellers, reducing drug-related litter, i.e. needles. Over the past 10 years, important harm reduction programs in Budapest have been discontinued. For example, the 2 largest needle exchanges have been forced to close, but the municipality of Budapest has supported street outreach programs to reach the most marginalized drug users over the past year. The Budapest Forum on Drugs, which includes representatives of all 23 districts and all professional and non-governmental organizations active in the capital have been invited to join, has completed the first situation survey of the last 15 years. On the basis of this study, the Budapest drug strategy is now under adoption. The strategy includes harm reduction as a separate pillar. Within this, we want to focus on making nightlife safer, which includes making harm reduction programs available in as many nightclubs as possible. To this end, we invited presentations of good practices from Vienna and Berlin on nightlife coordination to a conference last year, which was organized by the Harm Reduction Working Group of the Budapest Forum on Drugs. We consider it extremely important to learn about international best practices. It is also very important that foreign experts share them with each other and with Hungarian participants at this event. Please allow me to seize this opportunity to thank all Hungarian experts working in the field for the very valuable work that they have done and will continue to be doing in such a headwind and among such shortage of resources. It is in this spirit that I would like to wish all participants of this meeting a very fruitful cooperation. Thank you very much.
Great words from Deputy Mayor. So we're a little bit behind time, so I'm going to try and get us back on time. Be careful what you wish for, because when I said, call each other, Mika decided to call me in the middle of this, so because it's being live streamed and he's watching it in Finland. Anyway, that's typical. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Péter Sárosi, I'm sure you all know him, Head of Rights Reporter Foundation, Editor of the Drug Reporter website, Member of the Steering Committee of the Correlation European Harm Reduction Association, and our keynote speaker today.
Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Budapest and welcome to Hungary. I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces in this building of the Central European University, where I graduated actually in 2001 as a historian. Not the same building, but just the building beside this. But at the same time, you have to know that this university is not a university anymore here. This building is not a campus anymore. Unfortunately, now it's empty of students and empty of professors because the CU was forced to leave Budapest, and now it relocated to Vienna. And to be in this beautiful but empty building, it also represents where we are in Hungary, you know, that we are sliding from a democratic country to something else. And unfortunately, this same very hostile atmosphere which the deputy mayor was speaking about is also felt in the drug scene, in the harm reduction area. So, among other things, harm reduction is also a taboo word now in Hungary. So, if you really want to secure some funding from the government, you don't even use the word harm reduction. And you know, at this same university, we had summer schools, drug policy summer schools every year for many years, and we always took the students to a vibrant harm reduction scene to visit sites. And as it was mentioned before, several of these programs just closed down, so they don't exist anymore. And only a few services are left to keep harm reduction alive. And the civil society organizations often feel isolated and intimidated. So that's why your presence is also very important. If you walk in Budapest today, or yesterday you walked on the streets of Budapest, you just see the trendy cafes and the shiny surface of a, let's say, normal European country, but you don't see beyond the surface. And some really frightening things are happening in this country, which we call the shrinking space. We can call it the shrinking space for civil society. So there is like less space for organizations like mine. They're often scapegoated as foreign agents, and there is less space to think, to educate, to care about other people. And just right now, for example, the government is creating a new law just to monitor civil society organizations that are critical to the government because they say that they are endanger the sovereignty of the country. And just another example, speaking about LGBTQ issues in schools is prohibited in Hungary now. So yeah, there are some really negative trends. As a filmmaker, with my colleague István, we had the opportunity to travel to many countries and to interview key stakeholders in many of the countries you came from. So we had a chance to have an insight to how drug policies are made in other countries. Katrin also mentioned that this year, together with Correlation, we conducted a study, focus group study in 4 countries. I will speak about that later in the afternoon. So I really had a kind of opportunity to have an insight into drug policies in different parts of Europe. And we live in quite different realities in Europe. Sometimes I feel that we live in parallel universes in Europe. The challenges and the opportunities are quite different in different parts of Europe. In some parts of Europe, especially in the West, but I also include here Czech Republic and Slovenia. Now the real question is how you mainstream harm reduction, and the real question is innovation, so how you introduce innovative harm reduction programs. It's like even in the northern part of Europe, where there was a very strong abstinence culture, now you see that things are changing to the positive direction. There are like new drug consumption rooms, and even in like Iceland or Norway, which were very like bastions of abstinence culture before. So we see a lot of positive trends. At the same time, if you go to the eastern part of Europe, you still see that the question is not innovation or mainstreaming. The question is still the question of Hamlet, to be or not to be. So it's like a question of survival for harm reduction. And after the retreat of international donors, several very important programs were just collapsed in the region. So we have many empty seats where people could sit now who were working for programs which don't exist anymore, harm reduction programs. So we have to be aware of that as well. And of course, the war in Ukraine just complicated the things further. So some of the harm reductionists in the Eastern Europe, they actually fight for their lives and not for just funding. And you know, even though the Iron Curtain, which separated East and West, collapsed many years ago, but there is still an invisible Iron Curtain when it comes to innovation and harm reduction. So if you look like where are drug checking services, or you look at the map like drug checking services, drug consumption rooms, how many drug consumption rooms you see in the eastern part of Europe? Not many. And you know, the real problem is that innovation would be very badly needed also here in this part of Europe, because the drug scene is changing very rapidly. So when I started to work in this field in the early 2000s, most harm reduction programs were focusing on like white, middle-aged, heterosexual, male heroin injectors. And now this is changing. So, you know, there are new drugs are coming, new groups of people entering drug use with different routes of drug use, completely different context, and quite new patterns. So there are new psychoactive substances, crack cocaine, smoking, snorting, minorities, elderly people, chemsex, deep web markets. So there are a lot of new challenges and new opportunities as well. So it's like, I think we are in a crucial time where we have to also define what harm reduction is about, and offer something relevant to people who are not the usual crowd of our services, like not white male heroin injectors. So how can we offer something relevant? And that's why we need a lot of innovation and out-of-the-box thinking. You know, when harm reduction was created back in the 80s, 90s, then it was done from out-of-the-box thinking. Like, you know, first needle exchanges opened in a toilet, and it was like a guerrilla creativity, urban creativity of like people who were really try to find solutions. And I think we can apply the same principles of pragmatism and compassion to this new phenomenon, new kind of drugs, new kind of groups of people, to offer them something relevant, which is maybe not needles, but something else, and something which is relevant in the east and the west and the north and the south. So maybe we should think outside of the usual HIV prevention and overdose prevention box sometimes. So harm reduction is so much more than just needles and medicines and overdoses. So for me, harm reduction is a different way to ask questions from people. So not to ask like what's wrong with you, but ask what happened to you, and not to ask can you become someone else who can be helped, but you ask how can I help you now at where you are. So that's a very different approach, and this is what is the core of harm reduction. And the harm reduction is not possible without a very living connection to the community of people who use drugs. We are, as human beings, we are born to create connections with each other. And if we are isolated, we just can't work and we die. And in many countries, I don't see these connections, even though the harm reduction system is quite advanced. So even when I go to the West to film, I see some countries where there is an advanced health system and like services are available, but you don't really see the connection to the community, to the people who they serve. And it's sometimes the harm reduction system is organized in a very top-down way, you know. And programs are operated by smart and humanists, but still technocrats, you know, who have sometimes no real idea what's really happening on the scene, on the ground. And so we need this kind of living connection. We need to support communities to self-organize, and we need correlations, as this network is about correlations of different fields, different professionals, disciplines, and different levels of decision making. Even in Hungary, where we are now, there is a very hostile atmosphere, but you can find opportunities to work with some communities, some decision makers. You could see with the deputy mayor, with the city of Budapest, we could establish a good cooperation. That's an opposition leadership now in the city of Budapest. And I'm the head of the working group on harm reduction in this drug forum of Budapest. And we have been working with the city to create a new drug strategy now. Even if the city has not much resources, but it has some, symbolic support at least to people working in this field, and it creates a platform for us to, speak about issues and challenges. And just 2 weeks ago, we debated the Budapest drug strategy, the draft, with the chief of the police, the Budapest police, who's very much against harm reduction. And we discussed it for 2 hours. So it was a great opportunity to educate, the police about harm reduction, or this meeting just created an opportunity for us, together with Euro Input, to organize a workshop for people who use drugs. We don't have an organization of people who use drugs in Hungary, so we invited clients of OAT programs. Surprisingly, 9 people showed up, very enthusiastic people, and we could create the first network of people who use drugs. Yeah. It's still informal, but let's hope that it will grow something formal as well, and permanent one. So I really see that there is a power in communities, even in dark times. I think we can believe in that. And regardless of all these different realities we live in, we have more or less the same struggles everywhere, the same everyday struggles, very boring. You have to mention why harm reduction works, as Tony said, the thousands times, and you are so bored, that you have to use the same arguments, the same stupid counter arguments, and you can really get consumed by this everyday struggle. And it's also sometimes it's easy to forget our own mission, like that it's about reminding the society that people who use drugs are people. That's a very simple thing, but it's very easy to oversee or overlook that. And it's difficult to stay motivated in this everyday gray struggles. So yesterday we had a lot of discussions why correlation, what correlation is good for us, and how correlation can contribute to the work we do. And of course, I believe that there are many things like the data collection and technical support and research and training and all this stuff. And I believe that's very, very useful and important for us. At the same time, the main benefit for me to participate in this network and participate at events like this is to be reminded after these everyday struggles, this gray time, that we are not alone. So we are part of something bigger, and also we can speak to people who understand each other, and we can speak to people who finish the sentence after you, because they know what you think about. And also we come here to make new connections and correlations, and sometimes that's, I think, these informal conversations are the most important. So thank you for coming here, and please recharge your batteries before going home and continue the everyday struggles you are in. I love you. Thank you very much.
Wow, very, very good. Thanks, Péter. It's easy. It's easier to be a leader in harm reduction in a country that has a policy that accepts harm reduction. So there is a leader of harm reduction right there. And I know this all means very much to you. And thank you for helping to host us here. So we have another plenary session, the policy dialogue. We're a little bit behind time, so I'll invite the participants to hop up onto the stage and join me. I have some mics. So I'll just get a little bit organised. Does that work? Yep. And that one works. I'll give you that one. You want to come and join us there? Now. There we go. Somewhere. Okay. So, apologies, I'm going to put that out. So we know who we all are. There we go. Well, good morning. I'm going to allow you guys to introduce yourselves. Actually, if you don't mind, if you want to go first, Anna, that'd be great.
Hello, it works? Yes. So, good morning. I'm Anna Tarjan, and I pop into this panel a bit late. Currently, I'm without an institutional affiliation, but previously I worked 15 years until 21 in the Hungarian Redox focal point, where my primary responsibilities were monitoring harm reduction service provision, infectious diseases, problem drug use, prisons, so all related topics to this meeting. And I also did my PhD on the HIV and hepatitis C risk factors of people who inject drugs in Hungary between 2008 and 2015, which was a very specific era in terms of our country's harm reduction services and patterns of injecting. I also volunteered for some years at the Needle Syringe program, and I had the opportunity to work 2 years at the EMCDDA. That's why I left the focal point. But there I was working on different domains, on training and capacity building in Georgia in a bilateral project. So I think it's...
Thank you. Thank you.
Have been introduced before, but Péter Sárosi.
Forgotten already?
Hmm?
No, go on.
Yeah, I give the floor.
Hello, everybody. Great to see you here. My name is Ákos Toplánszky. I've been working in the drugs field in different parts of it for the last 42 years, and in many parts of it, probably was what could be interesting from the point of view of our gathering now. I was the Hungarian drug coordinator for a while, as Deputy Secretary of State, in the time when drug policies existed.
Okay, we'll get into that. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Czech. I'm a sociologist and a researcher, but I worked in the needle exchange program and worked with people who inject drugs for 10 years in Budapest. At the largest one, which was closed down in 2015 or 14, sorry. And I also was a focal point for correlation like 10 years ago or something like that, and worked on the last 2 editions of the Global State of Harm Reduction. Yeah.
So this is an eminent panel. Thank you, everybody. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the policy dialogue will outline the current drug policy situation in Hungary, address the ethical dilemmas of civil society in hostile political climates, and present some survival strategies. But I think what I'll do is, without further ado, get into a few questions for the panel. So the beginnings of harm reduction, and Ákos, mainly yourself, how was it in the early 2000s when you were a national drug coordinator? How did harm reduction gain legal recognition? How access to harm reduction increased in the 2000s? Could you just give us a sense of that?
Firstly, to react on your introductory part, speaking about Hungarian drugs policy, it is a tricky thing. It is tricky to speak about something which is missing fully. At the moment, we do not have drugs policy as such, officially. We have no drugs policy, no drug strategy, no center of governmental workforces and so on and so on. So it is and missing financial resources. Everything is missing. Just the repressional part of the policy is blooming. Okay, and back to the point. It was probably a fortunate situation in Hungary because somehow the then Fidesz and then government, which is identical with the I mean, in name, it is identical with today's government, but the orientation was totally different, and we were offered the opportunity to establish a drugs policy, a drug strategy, and even develop a lot of field in it. We have compromised that harm reduction as such couldn't be a pillar, political element of the strategy, even though we had the opportunity to support. And it has developed a lot. You can react on it, but according to the numbers, everything has developed from almost nothing to add something. It was, of course, not enough, but it was the start of the way. With this compromise that harm reduction couldn't be a main pillar of the strategy.
Okay.
But otherwise, we were all together. We planned a lot. We tried to establish a lot of services, and it became also familiar for the whole stage to understand what this phenomenon is about.
Very good. Is there anybody else from the panel who wants to talk about the beginnings at all? Anything you want to add?
Just to add that when we entered the European Union, that was a kind of boost to drug policy and the treatment system, because there were new resources available. And now, if you look back to the 2000s, sometimes it looks like a golden age for drug treatment, harm reduction and prevention, and everything. So there were new. I mean, it was far from ideal situation, of course, but at least you could see that things are getting better, slowly but getting better. And I see that in many other countries, from the eastern part of Europe, that the 2000s, this first decade, it was a more progressing decade than the one after that. So that period lasted until like 2009, maybe 2010.
So what went wrong? Why did we have this golden age at the very early 2000s, which isn't unusual? Other jurisdictions have had this happen. But what went wrong in Hungary?
What not? Just everything. It is the state of art. You are speaking about correlation, cooperation, connections between the fields of drugs policy, with those who are concerned, and so on and so on. I'm speaking, or we are speaking, probably about desertification. So that almost everything, all important elements of drugs policy is disappearing and are not present. It is a political time, a period of time, contra a policy-based period of time, which were probably common for us. So the understanding of the problem is fully and just political. And this is the point, and this is starting point. So, if I may say, we are delivering all those symptoms which are defined to avoid, if you wanted to have a reasonable drugs policy. So you can. We are very useful for you not to do what we are doing at the moment. Actually, not we, but the Hungarian government.
Yeah, and just from a service provider perspective, because I was working at the needle exchange program at that time. So it was like in the beginning there was like opportunity. So there was a chance. So we can do a lot of things, and we were learning, and I don't know. I analyzed the data we had at the needle exchange program, and we can provide like new information, like we have that much clients and we are growing and all those stuff. And then after the current government started in 2010, then the first thing was the financial resources that was like shrinking and decreasing, but we felt we can fight back, or I don't know, we had like we had the knowledge, and but after some time, so you know, when the team of the needle exchange program like decreasing, and you know, because you have to live, you have to earn money and all that stuff. So a lot of my colleagues left the scene and became, I don't know, IT guys and all those things, or started working in other in services for people who experience homelessness. So, but what was a really important lesson for me, that it's not so it's not just the right, the political right, or the government. It's the left also. So in that sense, this is something that all sides of the political scene can agree, that drug users are, I don't know, like the stigmatization of drug users and stigmatization of harm reduction, because the needle exchange program where I worked was closed down by a right-wing mayor, but at the same time, the other big needle exchange program was closed down by a left side mayor in another district. So, you know, it's like, I don't know, it looks like a public policy, but it's always in I don't know, a moralizing space. So that was the lesson for me from this. That's so, you know, this is something that all political sides can agree on.
That's interesting. So the left and the right were moving against harm reduction. Anna wants to come in. I'll just ask everyone to hold the mics up, because we're live streaming. You might be able to hear it at the back here, but we want to make sure that people can hear it at home.
Yeah, so just to go up to the national level that Robbie was sharing, the service provider level, what we could see at the national data level, that the first milestone of the decline of harm reduction service provision happened after 2011, when the fixed founding of the programs, that what Péter said, that in the decade before somehow it was not optimal, but provided a stability and predictability for the programs and the people who work there, and they could plan their services. This is what changed after 2011, when there were serious cuts in funding. So the result was, starting in 2012, that some quite important programs had to temporarily or permanently close down. Also, they had to, those who were still operating had to limit the number of syringes distributed. So definitely they could not operate optimally. Also, they had to reduce the opening hours. So this confidence and trust that they built out for long years towards the clients and the stability was started to be broken after 2011. And what I said related to my PhD, that it was happening in a very specific time in Hungary, because we were one of the countries who were highly hit by the synthetic cathinone injecting. So what we could measure in all our other data collection systems, that the traditional pattern of amphetamine and heroin injecting, which was coupled with lower injection times per day, changed. So there was an obvious need starting from 2012 for more syringes. What we could also see in the data, that there were less programs, less syringes were distributed, but the number of clients were increasing. The number of contacts were increasing until 2015. So people still wanted to go to the programs and find ways how to acquire syringes. And then came the second milestone, when the two big programs were closed down, and then we could see a very big drop in the number of clients and, of course, the number of syringes distributed. So to add for this era until 2000.
Okay, so see if I've captured this in my own mind is in 2000 things we had drug strategies included harm reduction. By 2010 there was a new government. From 2010 onwards, harm reduction services began to be defunded. Trust was lost, or was beginning to be lost, between service providers and service users, and then there was a huge defunding of two particular services, and the statistics also dropped because nobody was gathering statistics, or people weren't able to engage with services, that kind of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, we could still gather the statistics on the operating program. So actually the national level data collection was still ongoing. What I also missed to mention, that we could, from this 2010 to 15, what we could measure, the clear link, what happens if harm reduction services do not operate well, is we could measure, we still had a very good and reliable biobehavioral survey series, and we measured the doubling of the hepatitis C prevalence at national level from 25% to 50% in 3 years. And we could see in 2015, when MPS injecting was peaking, harm reduction services were very low, that there is an outbreak of hepatitis C in the community. We could see that new injectors and young injectors had a very high prevalence, which shows new infections.
Sure.
It was communicated, but...
And the harm reduction services were gone.
Well, the big ones.
I'll let Peter come in there. Thanks, Anna.
Just to add to that, that you see that, harm reduction declining, Hep C is going up. So that's the situation. You have the official data. And then you go to television. There was a television show where I had to debate the deputy mayor of that district, who was very much against the needle and syringe program, and on the show, I was quoting this data that you see that if you don't provide access to needles, that's what happens, and she said okay, how can we trust this data, because it's collected by needle exchange programs, and we don't trust needle exchange programs. So it was like denying the reality, So it was like, just to give you a taste, like what we faced, this kind of post-truth reality of in Hungary, that it didn't matter, like data. I mean, that time we lost the face, just because before that our advocacy was pretty much focused on like providing reliable data and things like that. But in the Hungarian scene, in the communication scene, truth, it just lost its relevance. But what it really was important, who can shout their lies stronger and louder. So this was like really like very, very depressing period for us, that this kind of traditional advocacy didn't work anymore in Hungary, because the traditional advocacy is, like you are providing the evidence, you show that what is happening is not according to the evidence, and you are kind of naming and shaming the governments. But they were not shamed. They were like, they just denied the reality, and this is not true. What we say is true, and that's all.
That's an interesting point. Sorry, do you want to come in, Akos?
If I may?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I would just mention... yeah, but yeah.
You have to use the mic.
I have much stronger voice. It's a compromise, I would mention here some points from the reality of Hungary, just because they are from my heart. You may know it. Mostly, it is about a phenomenon. We are speaking about drugs policy as a urban and foremost capital problem, but it is not in Hungary, and we have to mention it because it is the harsh reality at the moment in Hungary. The remote places drugs use. The drug use of Roma living in settlements. In remote places, in altogether 1,356 small villages and settlements and ghettos. The harsh reality is happening there. And the interesting case that the number of drug-dependent users there can be equal to the known number of drug users in Hungary, officially known numbers, because they are out of the map, so they are not present. They doesn't get any treatment. They are not data in a statistical system. You can you hear and others, but they are not appearing in any of. So you wanted to ask?
Yeah, it's scary. I've been to Budapest once before. I can see the gentrification of the city. It's a very beautiful city, and I could only imagine that what you've just described is the case, that people are outside of the city and across the country. But it's worrying and frightening, really, that you're saying there's no treatment options for them.
In this very nice capital of us, there are just 2 settlements, which we can speak about from this point of view, but there are 1,354 more in the country around. So it is the harsh reality, and even though it is especially very worrying, the news that reached me 2 days ago, and you even don't know about it, that in the dark rooms of the governmental party there is a fabrication of a strategy. So we will have a new strategy, but not a drug strategy, but a strategy against this phenomenon of destitutional drug use, with the primary lead of supply reduction players.
Which leads me into a question really around, you were saying about the fabrication was the language. The shrinking space for civil society, the engagement with policy development. I suppose, firstly, how did NGOs respond to government attacks, and what were the survival strategies to keep going where we could, where harm reduction services could, and to perhaps to ask the panel about the shrinking space for civil society in Hungary?
This is the point for us, I think, which concerns us very much, because all the playground is disappearing, and even among ourselves we have already problems, certain problems. We like each other, but it is not really clear how to survive in this situation. Just characterizing the situation in the time when we had the drugs coordination, really, I had 40 co-workers, colleagues, all together in 2 teams, and now there are just 1.5. Somehow looking for their spaces in certain ministries between the toilet and I don't know what. So. And sometimes they do get a chair. So it is not easy to work like this, yes. But you know very much. So it is the problem that we do not have the connection to the governmental or public administration responsible persons, because they are not existing. Yes. Certainly because there is no openness for doing this.
Is there anyone else from the panel who wants to come in on this? Certainly, Anna. Robert, okay.
Yeah, I knew that I have to speak about survival strategies, but I don't know, to be honest, I don't really know a good one. I mean, it's a bit individualistic thing, so you have to go and find a job. So that's a harsh reality. But I don't know, as a researcher, I don't know, my survival strategy was to document everything, and just for your consciousness, or I don't know. So you have to, I don't know, document that the coverage is decreasing, the hepatitis C prevalence is increasing. So that was a thing, and so what's worse is that teams disappearing, and with this the knowledge and the connections with the community and the trust. So you know, when the needle exchange program existed, we had like I don't know, 1,500 or so clients per year, and now the latest data shows that in the whole country, needle exchange program serves 500 clients. So, you know, so there are members of the community who has never been in a needle exchange program or any harm reduction program, who don't know anything about that. So and with this, there is no connection to the, I don't know, the health or the social welfare system at all. So that's a problem. I don't know how should I do about survival strategies when you know there is, I don't know, like 2 or 3 needle exchange program in the city right now. So yeah, and so that's the biggest problem, I think, that if we would have like good resources or suddenly we would have, I don't know how much or a lot of money, then it would take like years to build back those team of professionals,
Sure.
those that trust in the community, because
Sure.
we don't know those who are entering the scene or injecting for 5 years, because
It's a good point. It takes a long time to re-establish what's lost.
Like, I don't know, one of the survival strategies could be like I don't know, like somehow keep the, I don't know, keep the knowledge or keep. That's.
Thanks, Robert. Can I bring Anna in? Actually, she's just been waiting patiently for a second. It's good to have you all queuing up.
What I had in mind, just to say something positive things as well, that after 15 and 16, when what I said that the state funding, this fixed funding was withdrawn or really decreased, what I can see from the monitoring side also, that there were new actors and new collaborations happening that did not happen before in the field. For example, to mention that Hungary became a target country in the HARIAC project. Because we were reporting all the time what's going on. So this was also a good resource for the service providers to be in the HARIAC project on testing, etc. Also, the for-profit side, the pharmaceutical companies were already active in prisons on testing, but in the later years they also becoming very proactive in the community. And I can mention 2 linkage to care projects that were financed by pharmaceutical companies. So it gave back a bit of life for social workers, service providers. And also, I think you met yesterday the HEPAGO project, or I don't know, but for example, this HEPAGO project was a grassroots level. They were brought together from ex-social workers, they were working in previous big needle and syringe programs, and now they formed a team and they do a mobile program, and this team came together through this linkage to care project that was financed by the pharmaceutical company. And the last thing I would mention, that also the hepatologist community was really far away from service providers in the drug field, especially in the interferon era, and with the new DA treatment, they were coming to the service providers, okay, where are the clients, how we can find them. So there was some kind of hope around 2018 that the hepatologists have a bigger lobby at the Ministry of Health, and they would bring back low threshold and harm reduction better on the agenda. This did not happen in the decision maker level, but still between the hepatologists and the drug field, collaboration became close, and I think it's going very well compared to the previous years.
Good to have something positive to hear. That's great. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah. If we look at civil society and how civil society responded to this crisis of harm reduction, I would say that there were like 3 types of responses: fight, flight, and compromise. And first one, for example, Robbie's organization, first they were fighting, so they organized forums with the people who live around, and they were communicating in the media. They tried to refute all the accusations of the local mayor. Then there was the flight, which, as Robbie mentioned, some people made an existential decision to leave the field altogether. And then there was compromise, and some organizations chose to, try to be less visible, just to hide, and hide from the public and maybe keep a low profile, and then you can survive. But actually the second needle exchange that was closed down, they chose this path, so they didn't fight, but they were also shut down in the end. So that was also not a very successful strategy. And with the compromise, a lot of organizations just changed their profile also. So from harm reduction to recovery, which was the more fashionable term and ideological, route. So there are organizations also that chose to work only as a recovery organization and drop the harm reduction agenda altogether.
Okay, thank you. So, a couple of things. I want to just ask a little bit about drug trends now, if I could. Anna, could you say anything about drug trends now?
Drug trends now?
Yeah.
Although I'm not that, I did not work on this in the last 2 years,
okay.
but what I can mention, what I said that we had the peaking of the synthetic catenin injecting at around 2015. Then what we could measure, I can say it until 21, that actually that's why this whole thing around hepatitis C a bit faded away, because in 16, 17, what we could see in the people who inject drugs, that some of them and quite a big proportion became later moved on to synthetic cannabinoids and also to inhaling injectable substances. So there was a pattern change again. So between 15 and let's say 2021, it was very difficult to see and measure how big is the population. We could see a definite growth until 15, but then the access was narrowing because the providers were, what we already said, we could not access that much the population who inject drugs, but at the same time they also changed patterns. And I think this is still the current case, but maybe Robbie, you can add something to the current drug trends?
Yeah, that's another important lesson from the last decade. So that harm reduction services are the most important source of information on current drug trends. So because that's these are the services that are like in contact with the actual or the current drug users, but what we can see is that probably the injecting is decreasing probably, but we don't know for sure, and that the synthetic cannabinoid smoking is like very established scene right now, and but I don't know if there is a good harm reduction response to that, but yeah, so that could be developed in the past years if we would have harm reduction scene. So I think that's important, and another interesting thing that when harm reduction just an illustration how important harm reduction service is for the or getting information or for knowledge, that when the two large needle exchange program closed down in the next year in the seroprevalence survey, the hepatitis C prevalence in Budapest seemed to be decreasing because those services wasn't available for the survey, which was in contact with the most vulnerable part of the community.
Thanks, Robert. I'm going to try and square a circle here for us all. Well, firstly, obviously, we don't have a drug policy in Hungary. When we do have one, it seems, from what I can hear, it's not going to be informed by civil society. But we heard from the deputy mayor of Budapest earlier that the city is adopting a drug strategy for Budapest. I wanted to ask each of you, to wrap up, what do you make of that current process, and how do you see the future? you want to start? Who's got the mic?
Yeah, just a sentence before. I would be more optimistic than I was, or we were altogether. I've started the whole issue in 78, 79, so it is already history. And back in communism, when it was even not just neglected but prohibited to speak about drugs. So it was the drugs policy at that time, and we started to work with drug addicted person. And that since has happened so much and so interesting thing. We are sitting here, we are representing great fields of this story. So it is great, and it will be the case in the future as well, for sure, after a period of difficulties. But because it is a necessary thing to do so. Concerning the drug strategy of the Budapest capital, actually, very frankly, I stepped out of the whole thing. I was also part of it because the local government is totally deprived to have means for delivering really a drug strategy. So the capital doesn't have the means to establish a drugs policy in reality, because the strategy is always about reality, not about paper. We admire a paper if it becomes a reality, but this is the problem.
Implementation.
Implementation. And actually it is very, very limited what the capital can do. I am, of course, the orientation of this strategy in wording, I'm sympathizing with it, of course, but it is not really responsible for me.
So you stepped away, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I am stepped out. But I am very much for it.
Yeah, so I have not stepped out because I don't know, it was done properly. Like the city financed a proper research to be the foundation for the drug strategy, and I think there are realistic goals in it, and with every pillar we have like suggestions or to the government, or what should be the city should ask from the government and try to enhance the situation. Yeah, but I think that's a positive thing. That's okay. It's not the national government, but the city would like to do something like and it was done properly, I think. So like by the book. So funded with the research and done by professionals working on the field, and the community was involved in reviewing the strategy. So yeah, I think it's a small step, but it's a good direction, and it's like I don't know, like an illustration how should it be done.
Thank you, Robert.
So as Ákos mentioned, we have some disputes within civil society, and I think that's natural because, people see alternatives differently, and what can you do in this? It's a very difficult situation, so it's not because someone is less moral in it, but it's just seeing different kind of paths forward. And if you look, compare the drug strategy, city drug strategy of Budapest with other big cities in Europe, it is true that Budapest has much less resources and power than, for example, if you go to Vienna, the Viennese drug strategy is more important than the Austrian drug strategy, I'm sure, because Vienna has a lot of resources and system. In Budapest, we have very few resources, so as Ákos mentioned, the government deprived the cities from resources and power. So that's something, and we had a discussion, whether it is still useful to make a drug strategy for the city. And I have no illusion, that this strategy can change the scene in Hungary, because there are no means to it. As I think about it, is more, as also Robbie mentioned, that this is a kind of blueprint of a national drug policy. So how should drug policy done in a proper way? So there was a consultation, there was a research, community involvement, everything done as it should be done on the national level, which is not done. And it was the first time, for example, we could make a involvement of the communities in a drug policy, which is done about themselves. So it was like, for us, it was very important. The process itself is very important, not only the result. There are small resources, and sometimes these very small resources are also very important for organizations working in the field, coming from the city, and we can just sometimes just connect the dots. Where correlations and connections are missing, so like the health system doesn't speak to the addiction system, the social care, the homeless care. They don't have knowledge about harm reduction. The police has no connection to the harm reduction program. So even with relatively low resources, we can do something important, or in the safer nightlife scene, where we have some very good harm reduction groups, volunteers, and we can maybe move forward things. So it's like maybe small steps, but to the right direction.
Thank you, Peter. Anna,
yes.
The future.
The future. I was also not living here for 2 years, so but actually I would bring in the word training, because at the EMCDDA I was in Georgia, which is not fully similar, but we have some similarities with Georgia and Hungary, and there we provided training on prevention, which is another domain for decision makers, and we started at a high level. Actually, we did teaser sessions, not me, but Georgian specialists at high level, and then we went to the municipality levels. And I did not work that much before on training, but I think, and I reflected back in myself to my own country's situation, and maybe it's really not feasible still at the moment, but I think that we have these parallel universes of the political level and the professional level, and somehow we have to make it getting closer. I think it's a great thing that in Budapest we have this new approach, and they are open to it. But I think maybe somehow we should think of training or roundtable discussions, because just only to show reports and data to the national level decision making did not reach anything. But maybe if we can get somehow people together at a table, and they are there with their personalities and emotions and not with their institution walls, maybe we can reach something. But it's really just maybe a very naive idea, and I did not live here for 2 years, and maybe that's why I have this very positive mindset. But and I also think that even if you begin training or consultations at lower levels, so not at high decision-making levels, you never know if these people may get into power in 3 or 4 years. So that's my contribution.
The long game. So I want to thank you all for your insights into the situation here in Hungary. I take the point about Budapest's city drug strategy, that implementation is everything, and it will remain to be seen. But staying at the table is really important. We talked about agency here at this meeting earlier, and I would encourage you all to keep on keeping on and stick with it. So thank you. We're going to go to coffee. We're not going to go to questions because we want to get back on time. So I apologise if you have any questions, and perhaps if you can stay for coffee, people might ask you. I'd like to just ask you to give a round of applause for the panel. Thank you. Okay.
hello. Morning.
Sit down now.
All right, shall we slowly start the second part after the break? So we try to stick to the time and go for lunch all together. So this session we will be presenting the results of our civil society-led monitoring of harm reduction in Europe. And we have here our panel members. And I will ask them, so I'm Raffaella, for those who don't know me, Raffaella Rigoni. I'm the head of research at Correlation and coordinate with my colleagues our monitoring of civil society-led monitoring of harm reduction. And with us, we have...
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Iga Jeziorska, a senior researcher at Correlation and a person responsible for monitoring essential harm reduction services.
Good morning. I'm Tuukka Tammi from Finland, a sociologist, and been working with the Correlation's monitoring project since 5 years, and I'm responsible for the hepatitis C report of that whole project.
Good morning, my name is Daan van der Gouw. I'm also a sociologist from the Netherlands, working at Trimbos Institute, doing a lot of drugs market research, coordinating also the Dutch Harm Reduction Network, and here I am in the position of the coordinator, the leading person of the new drug trends section.
My name is Guy Jones. I do drug checking in the UK with the organisation The Loop, and I'm here on the behalf of the Trans-European Drug Information Network, for whom I work to collect all of the data generated from all of the drug checking services in Europe and pull it together so that we can have one searchable statistics database to generate charts, etc. from.
Hi, my name is Lisha Dara. I work as Research Support Officer in Correlation. I have a background in psychology and I've been focusing on the mental health section of the monitoring report.
Thanks. So together with all these wonderful experts and our wonderful focal points that we have been meeting yesterday, we do the civil society-led monitoring of harm reduction in Europe. And I'll just very briefly introduce some things that we do before we go into the panel discussion. All these topics that they just mentioned, so we are dividing them into actually 5 volumes. And with here is not with us today Alice Pomfret. Alice is also a research officer at at Correlation, and she was also doing the city report. So that's another thing that we do on top of what was already mentioned. And why do we do the civil society-led monitoring? So there are several monitoring agencies already looking into harm reduction, how many services exist, looking into prevalence of drug use. As a civil society organization where our members are mostly providing harm reduction services, also taking into account what was said before, that harm reduction services are the best place to look into what is actually happening in the field. What we try to do is to complement all that data by looking into the implementation of harm reduction. So not only if the policies are there, if the service is there, but how is it accessible, and what do we need to change in case we need to change. So this year also we are trying to focus more on advocacy, and for those participating yesterday, our focal points, we were discussing a lot about advocacy, how do we do data-driven advocacy, and today in the panel we will be discussing about the results of the monitoring this year, but also what are the implications in terms of advocacy for those results. and you will be seeing the publications coming between December and February. You will also be seeing some webinars, be invited for some webinars when the publications come in for the launch. So just to go very briefly, what do we do? So one of the publications is about essential harm reduction services, and it looks into availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality of harm reduction services for different subgroups of people who use drugs. And here in this map you can see all the focal points and their cities that were contributing this year to monitoring essential harm reduction services. And in orange, you will see the cities that could consistently participate between 2020 and 2023. And for those, Iga will present after we could make a comparison to see how things are developing in the last years. The second one is we look into hepatitis C care, and Tuka will be presenting the results of it later. And then for that one, we look into the availability, access to interventions that are part of the continuum of care for people who inject drugs. And we are looking into expanding that maybe for next years to people, not only people injecting, but people using stimulants perhaps. And here are the focal points also contributing to the monitoring of hepatitis C. These are the same that were contributing to harm reduction essential services. And they do that via a survey. So this is a survey that we send to all focal points, and focal points contribute with consulting experts as well. Next, we have new drug trends. So we look into the emergence of new substance, but also new combinations of substance or new groups using old or newly known substances, new different forms of consumption. And here are the focal points who have contributing this year. These are 17 cities. And after a long time doing that via a survey, we have decided to do that via focus group discussions, and that worked quite well. We have a really good amount of information that Dan will be introducing to you. And we also heard that focal groups were not only good for data collection, but also for people gathering and getting to know each other and getting to talk, so locally as well. This year, for the first time, we are also having a collaboration with the TEDdy network that will be introduced more by Guy. And via the TEDdy, so we are getting a report on the data collected via drug checking services in terms of substances and purity trends. So we looked more into, they gather a whole range of data, and we focus more on substances that are more related to the public that our members are working with. And Guy will be showing that later. These are all the drug checking services contributing to the TEDdy network that are the base of the data that Guy will be presenting to us later. Finally, we have, and I forgot to say that for the TEDdy, those who are interested in knowing more about it, tomorrow at 9:30, for the drug checking, there is a session that will be talking about drug checking, but also new drug trends. So both Dan and Guy will be there. If you are interested in that, please join the parallel session. We have also looked into the mental health of harm reduction staff. We know that there is a huge need to look into our own mental health and well-being as harm reduction staff. So Lisha could do that, looking into the characteristics of workers, the challenges, the coping strategies that workers have. And this were the focal points contributing to the mental health. And for those interested, also this afternoon, you have, I see at 4, right, a session focusing on mental health, where some of our focal points also will be as panelists talking about the different challenges and coping strategies. Last but not least, we have the city reports, and that's a new way that we are looking into how to focus more on cities and on specific either urgent topics or looking into good practices, and that is a way of getting closer to advocacy and local advocacy. We also have a session tomorrow at 9:30 for those who would like to know more about it. Our focal points will be there also talking not only about what's happening in their cities, but more cross-cutting issues related to drug consumption rooms, opioid agonist treatment, and how to assist better communities that are more marginalized. And these were the focal points contributing to the city reports this year. We have a limited capacity, that's why we have only 5. So it was we had to do a common selection there. So if you want, please join tomorrow to hear more from them about that. And now, so we would like to go more with you to the results. So all this monitoring process, what are the results that we had? So I would like to hear from our panel members how they see that are the main developments in each field that they have been looking at. And for some of them, we'll have some slides to illustrate with some graphics. So Iga, if you could start.
Yeah, thank you, Rafa. Yes, in terms of essential harm reduction services, I think what is interesting to see and what is actually possible for us to compare across different years is the availability of different services, because this is something that we've monitored since 2020. And what we can see, so the analytical process kind of involves identifying those services where the change has been the most prominent. And these services include naloxone in prison, employment opportunities, and legal support. The symbols there may not be very understandable for you. What it means is, in the case of naloxone in prison, between 2020 and 2023. In 2023, there were 6 more focal points than in 2020 who responded that there is decreasing availability of naloxone in prison to the level that it's not available at all. Further, 1 focal point reported decreasing availability, but still some remaining availability. In 2023, in case of 4 focal points, the availability reported was higher in 2023 than in 2020, but also importantly, 6 more focal points said that they didn't know whether naloxone was available in prison in their cities or not, which kind of indicates perhaps the deteriorating relationship and level of knowledge regarding what's going on in the closed settings. The same kind of symbols you can see in the other services. So 6 more focal points reported no availability of employment opportunities for people who use drugs in their cities, and 4 focal points, no legal support. Further focal points also reporting deteriorating availability, and only few of them increasing. Now, we have some significant changes of also seemingly decreasing availability for drug checking and needle and syringe programs in prison, but we are still kind of confirming and double checking the data, so I will not go into details for that yet, as it's still in progress. If we could, another perspective on how services availability has been changing is to, this doesn't look good. It looks completely, it looks different here. So you have to follow my narrative then, which may not be very easy. But so another approach that we've taken to see the changes of this availability is to take into consideration as specific services and see by how many, because we are measuring availability on 5-point scale. So we've just looked at by how many points across all of the focal points, the availability changed, if that makes sense. So for shelters and housing, the decrease in availability was the most prominent, with 11 points down in total across all of the focal points between 2020 and 2023. Then opioid-assisted opioid agonist treatment was decreasing. The availability was decreasing also significantly for needle and syringe programs and for drug checking. And in terms of improvement, we had prevention of sexual risks of increasing availability, naloxone in general, naloxone distribution, and distribution of safer intranasal kits. And yet another perspective from the point of view of specific cities, we had the highest deterioration of availability of all of the services that we examine in London, in Dublin, Berlin, and Luxembourg, according to our focal points, and improvement in Porto, in Athens, and in Milan between 2020 and 2023. And the very last information, we, for the first time this year, we included our question examining barriers to delivering services to different populations in a way that several barriers could have been reported by the focal points. And here you have the list of the most underserved subpopulations of people who use drugs. These are aging people who use drugs, migrants without legal rights to assistance, LGBTQI plus community, people who practice chemsex, people in prison settings, people in party settings, and young people. And for these populations and all of the others, actually in total 720 barriers were reported by all focal points, and lack of funding, lack of political will, and lack of meaningful involvement of the specific communities were reported as the most challenging, most prominent barriers to deliver services to different subpopulations. So I think that would be it from me. We have very little time. The report will be published in the beginning of the year, probably late January or beginning of February, so we'll be able to see more of that. We don't have special sessions during this meeting, but the report will be out very soon. Thank you.
Okay, is it me now? Yes. And how does it look? Okay, yeah. Okay. So I've been reporting on the basis of the data provided by the focal points, the hepatitis C section of the monitoring, and hepatitis C has been there from the very beginning of the monitoring when it started in 19, and so this is fifth year in a row already. It has got 25 questions on the policy guidelines, relationship between the official policy and practical level, if they meet or not. And then there are several questions about testing practices, treatment practices, who's paying, and what's the role of the civil society organizations and harm reduction in the field of hepatitis management. And as you know, that the kind of the big goal behind is the global elimination plan by the WHO by 2030. And as the title of the slide says, this is kind of self-evident. The elimination proceeds at very different speeds in different countries and cities in Europe. We can see progress, but limited progress on the simplification of care pathways, task shifting between different actors, and improving community access. The DAAs, the drugs used to treat Hep C, are accessible in all cities, all 35 cities, but there are also restrictions for their use that are more in detail described in the report that will be published already in December, quite soon. It's in graphic design now, so you will get it in the coming weeks. we have a couple of questions also regarding the stigma and discrimination towards people who inject drugs at different points of HIV care. And as you might guess, it exists, stigma and discrimination, and there will be also city-based data on in which services, in which cities. You can see that then from the report. Now I can only talk on a general level within this time frame. But from the positive viewpoint, we can see that for several things, the kind of positive development has been re-established after the difficult pandemic times with closed services and restricted opening hours in many cities, also for hepatitis testing and treatment. But we can also still see that in many cities there's, especially for harm reduction service and community-led services, lack of economic and political support and insufficient infrastructures for each HGV policy and practice for people who use drugs. I have a couple of notions or individual questions here. This one is about testing. It's a confirmatory testing. It's freely available in most cities, but in many cities only at specific testing points, so the availability and access is not that wide or good level. And about half of the cities that took part in the survey, this confirmatory testing can be also done in harm reduction services. We have questions about how harm reduction organization services face limitations in their possibilities to do Hep C related work, and many of them report most commonly lack of funding, lack of integration with general healthcare, and lack of staff, but also lack of recognition and political support. And like Rafa already told, this year we have been looking to some extent also comparisons between the last 4 years to those 25 cities that have been there every year. And this is something we will work on more next year also, to see the real kind of progress in these cities. But now we can generally say that over the years, 4 years, there is a trend in the distribution of different treatment locations for people who use drugs, which is positive. And for treatment within prisons, there is also a notable increase within the last 4 years. But then there's still an obvious need for diversifying still treatment locations for people who inject drugs with access to DAAs, focus on expanding treatment within prisons, general practitioners, and of course in harm reduction services also. This is the first taste from the report, but as I said, it will be out soon, the whole thick report. Thanks.
Thanks, Tuka. Now, Dan, how have been things developing in the new drug trends field?
Yeah. Hello once again. I will be very short. I have only the half of the time Tuka and Iga has, so I will be very quick. So this is why I have some pictures here for you. Within this year's monitoring of new drug trends, we included not 17, but actually 18 focal points. Also Copenhagen will be added to the list. And it has some very interesting features. Just to look at, if you're on your left, right probably, no, left, you see some newly mentioned or reported substances. One is in Dutch, padodruppels. It was in Amsterdam. It's magic mushroom droplets. So it's like this tinctures that you can add to your skin, and it has a mild hallucinogenic effect. Reported for the first time. Also reported for the first time was in another area, HHC gummy bears. So HHC is a substance, it's synthetic. Effects are also a little bit milder than THC. But it's growing popularity in Europe, and it was reported by 1 or 2 focal points. A new one, but already a bit old one as well, is pink cocaine, cocaina rosada or 2C, which is nothing to do usually with cocaine, but it's a mixture of ketamine, MDMA, and some other substances. It's around in Europe. It was reported by several focal points. It's not causing big problems because it's more of a luxury drug than anything else. But more worrying are the presence of xylazine, as reported by some focal points, and also the fact that the reports say that because of the ban of Taliban on the production of opium, the production would have decreased already by 95%, but since there are stockpiling still, it is expected that starting next year or so there will be actually a heroin drought in Europe. But so far there's no mentioning of that. And the heroin drought in itself may be, really effective or bad news for people who use heroin, but it also may lead people to start using synthetic opioids. This is a worrying scenario, but at the moment not yet happening, luckily. But we'll have to see for next year's monitoring what comes out of that. Okay, to be very brief, sorry. So some conclusions include that we believe that these new drug trends allow for a timely reporting, really timely since we collected data until October or actually November of this year. So it's really timely information that we gather, and if I speed up my pace, we will actually have a report ready in January. It also serves as a focus group discussion. They also serve as a rapid assessment to see what actually is happening with all these stuff in the media on new drugs, these drug frenzy media alerts, whether it's actually true or not what's happening. And by having these focus groups, you can easily see what is going on in your city, and you can counteract all these media stuff, which is usually very sensationalist and has seldomly anything to do with reality. These findings that we have, they corroborate other studies such as EMCDA European drug reports. It also adds deepness and richness to already existing data. And it also provides interesting outlooks actually, intelligence on drug markets in smaller cities that you not usually hear about, for instance, Belts in Moldova or Podgorica in Montenegro. And also it does justice to qualitative research because the quantitative data that has been collected for many years by EMCDA and UNODC, they are not enough to really understand the context of local drug markets, and therefore you need this additional information. And I think we as Correlation, as a network, we can be proud of what we have achieved this year and also the last years. And I hope to continue next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Now we can hear a bit more about new drug trends from a different perspective, from the drug checking services with Guy.
Yeah. So before I get you excited for the report about the new drug trends, I just wanted to introduce what the TEDI network is a little bit, because I figure that some of you may not have heard of or be aware of the Trans-European Drug Information Network as a network. Certainly you may have come across some of the member organizations. The TEDI network was first established in 2011, and there was a short tranche of funding, and it collected data and collected the data together. When the funding ran out, the project had to stop, and we restarted doing this in 2017. And the collection of data is easy enough when each organization is doing that in their own right. Where it becomes difficult is you have many different languages that the data is being collected in. You have different names for drugs. So 4-MMC in one country is methadone in another country. And in a computer system, it says, oh, these are two different drugs, and it won't put them in the same chart. It's very difficult to just instantly compare that data. So the project that I'm involved with is this integration of the data, being able to bring it all together and make it all usable so that as much as possible we can see not just what is happening at the city level, where enough data exists. This is something that Dan highlighted. Sometimes there simply aren't enough samples being collected in a small region to really understand the trends there. But then when we aggregate that up to country level, and certainly when we aggregate it to European level, we can actually start to see the trends developing across Europe and see what's happening. And drug checking data is really valuable because unlike with wastewater analysis, unlike with police forensic seizures, drug checking services actually get to talk to the service users. And so we can really collect data that is completely inaccessible through other means. We can find out, did you intend to buy isotoniazine, or were you trying to buy heroin? And that can really shed some light on how drug trends are developing and the level of concern that we need to show about them. So I just wanted to, kind of tease you with a couple of interesting charts that will be in the report. Looking at the absolute purity changes. So this is when we have a sample of amphetamine that has a purity of, say, 25%. That has increased slightly. And this is the same kind of trend for many drugs. Over the last 5 years, we've seen small increases in purity in absolute terms. But when we look at the relative change in purity, and this is the change that is important for users, if we look at the change in purity for MDMA, it's a small change for a user. The difference between 80% and 85% is not that impactful. For a heroin user, a 30% change in the purity of the substance that they are using, actually, that's a really big impact because that's the 30% change in the dose that they need to take. And that can mean if somebody has been out of the market for some time, if they have been abstinent and they return to it, the dose that they were previously taking could well be enough to put them into an overdose. So being able to collect this data and being able to have access to this as partner organizations is really, really valuable. So that's why we're kind of working on this drug checking data to get it usable for all of you.
Thank you so much, Guy, also for trying to explain everything, all of you so far in such a brief time. We are aware of that. And now, Lisha, we are going to a different topic with the mental health of harm reduction staff.
Yeah, so as Rafa mentioned, we looked at the coping mechanisms, challenges and opportunities for organisational support for staff mental health. I think unsurprisingly, we all know that working in harm reduction can be quite challenging. One of the biggest challenges that emerged was related to unsupportive political environments, which we heard a little bit about earlier on. But it really trickled down into all of the other areas and all of the different challenges and prevents organisations from being able to provide the support that they would like to. On a more individual level, it kind of feels as if harm reduction staff often have to balance this tightrope between being very dedicated to the job and also then creating these personal boundaries as well and creating a work-life balance. In terms of coping mechanisms, what we really see is the importance of relationships. So the relationships between staff and clients, between staff members, but also, as was mentioned earlier on by Tony, these professional networks as well are really, really important in supporting staff mental health. I'll go into a little bit more detail later on at 4 o'clock, so I hope to see some of you there. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. We know that this is very brief, and we asked them all to be very quick because we had only 50 minutes, and we have so many things that we have done and people have worked. So we encourage you, when the reports are out, that you read them, that you talk to them to know more about it. But now we have still some minutes to go, so we have 13 minutes, I think. So I would like to hear a bit from you. So we heard a bit about, there are still several groups of people who use drugs that are persistently less assisted. We have a bit of a recovery in the hepatitis C testing and treatment after COVID, but there are still some challenges. There are some new substances coming in. There are some changes with purity that have impact into how people may experience drug use and maybe overdose or other things. And we have a situation with mental health that we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to focus on how we can do that. So if you look into that, into each one of you, what do you think are the pressing issues that we need to advocate for at the moment for harm reduction? And if you can say just a couple of sentences about it, and then maybe we still have some time for 1-2 pressing questions from the audience.
Well, I think that given the context with the potential synthetic opioids coming to Europe, like in larger amounts, quantities, drug checking is well underdeveloped at the European level. And this, I would say, should be one point of advocacy. But also, in the essential harm reduction services, we've examined, so I was talking about availability only, but we also checked accessibility, and what can be seen is that the broader services, the integration services like housing, legal support, and income generation or employment for people who use drugs, these are kind of consistently not available and not accessible. The least almost from all of the services, with exception of drug consumption rooms and prison setting harm reduction. But they are also consistently deteriorating, it seems. So this is also one of the areas where I think our advocacy efforts should be put, kind of adopting the viewpoint also that harm reduction is more than only prevention of infectious diseases. So I would say that drug checking, consumption rooms, and the integration services. Thanks.
Okay, for hepatitis C, I would think now on the basis of the data that we have from many years, it's rich data, lots of good best practice descriptions, and we can start to clearly see who's doing that in a good or the best way. So I think the advocacy point is important. We need to think of ways to help those cities and countries to whether to create working methods that are based on the good models that we know, but also ways of putting a bit more pressure on the political and support side in the countries and cities. And how to do that, I don't know, but we will find out. So I think this building the advocacy strategies for those ones that are not doing that well still.
I see 3 things to do in terms of advocacy. The first one already mentioned by Iga, but I need to stress that again, is to improve and to extend drug checking services, as they are, only available in a few cities still in Europe. People who use drugs are basically left to themselves or left to the trust of the dealer what they're actually taking, and this is not necessary, and it's costing lives, and it's unnecessary issue. So that should be improved as quick as possible. A second thing is, I didn't mention, but the use of crack cocaine is reported by many focal points to have increased, while services for stimulant users are lagging behind. So not only needles or more needles, but also crack pipes and stuff like that, foil. It's really underreported, and I think that crack cocaine use will be increasing over the next few years. And the third one I also didn't mention, but in the reports also we saw that the use of the internet and internet-based platforms as a means of buying and selling drugs increased the last year. It was mentioned by many by many focal points, and I believe that outreach workers should not just go on the streets any longer, but also go online and see what's going on there. And also, it's nice to have Mireia in the back, because her colleague Fernanda Cardavilla already many years ago started doing outreach work online and in deep darknet based forums to provide essential harm reduction information to people who need that in countries where there's nothing at all. So these three things. Thank you.
I think, obviously, coming from a drug checking background, for me, it's the drug checking point. I am certainly concerned about the emergence of nitazines and the possibility at the same time that we may be facing a heroin drought in the future. And I think that puts us potentially very exposed to finding out the hard way, where we do not have enough provision of naloxone and where we are not in contact with enough of the opioid-using population, that we really stand to potentially get caught out by this if these fears come to fruition. So yes, I think we need to expand the access to drug checking in cities where it does not exist, but also to make sure in cities where it does already exist that we are in contact with opioid-using populations before the problems start. We can't afford to wait until there are rashes of overdoses before we start to make sure that we're in contact with everybody.
I think in terms of mental health, there really is very little out there focusing specifically on harm reduction staff. So there's a lot of opportunity for more research, but I think also developing maybe a toolkit and more practical advice for organizations that within this political environment, they can still support their staff's mental health would be really helpful too. But I'm looking forward to the discussion later to see what comes up as well.
Thanks. So we have a lot of work to do, it seems. We have a lot to advocate for. We have a few minutes for questions, and it would be nice to hear from you. How did that all land? Like, do you recognize those needs? Do you have questions around that? Anyone would like to comment or make a question to the panelists?
So Rafa will be able to say when the date of expected publication is, but for me today, my job was just to get you excited for it and make you want to download the whole report. I didn't want to spoil it.
Thank you very much for all these interesting issues that you explore. I would like to ask if, according to your point of view, homelessness, cuttings in the income, low incomes, and cuttings in the healthcare budgets are something that horizontally, in a way, cross all the issues that you described, mental health and etc.
Who would like to go for that?
I can start about that. You know, when it comes to drug checking services, it's exactly what Guy mentioned. You know, what we see in the Netherlands when it comes to drug checking is this profile of male, white, highly educated people who use drugs well advanced before they do that, well planned before they do that. So what we don't see is vulnerable groups of people. So opioid users, we don't see that much, but especially labor migrants, they actually don't know about the existence of drug checking services, and would they know, they probably would not go there because of the difference in culture. So we have to do that in the next few years. We have to look into that to improve the access of those people who are vulnerable groups to access drug checking services.
Yeah. If I understand your question correctly, What you mentioned, so like decrease in the incomes and homelessness, these are, I think, the phenomena that are kind of very tightly connected to drug use, and these intersections of multiple vulnerabilities are extremely important to address. As we see in the data on harm reduction essentials, these are exactly the areas that are the least developed and deteriorating the most. Together with employment, housing, as I said before, and legal support. I think that, as I said already before, also that this is one of the main areas for advocacy and for pushing the governments to improve the functioning of the welfare states in general also, not only in the context of harm reduction and drug use, but in general. You're in Athens and in Greece, you've experienced very drastic austerity measures in the recent decade or so. It's also a good example of how the things can go south when the system of care is not there.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. I've got a question to all of you. I noticed that several of you mentioned the risks of the potential risks of synthetic opioids in Europe, and it was in some of your introductions. And I wonder what you would recommend that we could do in order to be better prepared for something that is possibly to happen, likely to happen, so that we don't have to learn it the hard way, as Guy said.
Thank you, John Peter, for this interesting question. I think that within the framework of the drug project, but also beyond that, there's a number of best practice when it comes to dealing with this issue, and that also might lead to the fact that we are not in as dangerous situation as the US and Canada is now. So best practice include drug, the list of essential harm reduction services. So it's drug checking, it's drug consumption rooms, it's naloxone, it's housing first, it's all these things that avoid a situation like we have in the US. And also monitoring. Monitoring is very important to, before you do any policy action, you have to monitor the market. So it's drug checking, but it's also going online to see on forums, for instance, or discussion boards to see whether a substance is actually being discussed in your country, because that might be a sort of a signal that, okay, there's a lot of talking about nitazines maybe nowadays in a country. It means that there is a demand for that, and so you might expect that as well entering your country soon. So these are the things you could and you should do.
I think it's important to highlight this word potential. It is certainly a threat to us at the moment, but clearly it is nothing on the scale that we have had in the United States over the last 5 years. In the first 6 months of this year, I think we had fewer than 10 samples of nitazines, and 4 of those were intentionally purchased as nitazines. So at the moment, we're not seeing this as a threat, but I think, it's having that monitoring there and being able to see in real time if this is starting to increase exponentially, then we need to be able to be ready to deploy resources for it. And if it doesn't start to increase, then okay, we maybe don't need to direct so much resource there, and we can think about prioritizing those resources for use elsewhere. In terms of really practical measures, if this does become a problem, it will absolutely be necessary to have quantitative drug checking services, because the content, the potency of opioid sample can vary massively with these highly potent substances. And of course, to be able to have rapid detection strips for these drugs, as we have had for nitazines. And these are becoming available now within the last sort of month. And I would expect that more companies will start to offer those in the short term.
Thanks a lot. I I think we are good in timing. Thanks a lot for being very brief and bringing the main more interesting or main results. I encourage all of you to visit this afternoon the mental health session, those who want, at 4, and tomorrow morning the drug checking session at 9:30 and the city report session also at 9:30, where we will be discussing cross-cutting issues among the different cities. Thank you so much for the panelists and you.
Sorry. You need that. Doing changing the set. So if I could have the panelists up for the next session. You know who you are. Come on up, take a seat. Oh yeah, Beatrix, Peter, Graham, Roberta. Okay, we're doing well, time-wise. The next session, the next plenary session is about correlations activities, and we're going to be hearing about civil society involvement case studies, harm reduction in prison, advocacy drug consumption rooms, and harm reduction and gender. And the order I have our speakers in, I'm going to invite people to come up. Have you got you've got slides? Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what I understand. Yeah. Do you want to jump up and do it? It's probably easier for the online people to hear you from up there.
Just, it continues with you.
Should I have the whole presentation, which I supposed to make it?
You can just make it short, very short. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So Peter is going to present on their work on civil society engagement with policy structures for CERN. Just to say, the format is 5-minute presentations. Then we're going to have a discussion, and if we have time, we'll open it up to some questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter.
So, as I mentioned before, together with Correlation, conducted a study on the level and quality of civil society involvement in 4 European countries: Finland, Greece, Hungary, and Ireland. So the story goes back to the Civil Society Forum on Drugs, which is an expert body of the European Commission, where we, in the previous years, we had several studies on civil society involvement, because we think that's one important issue. So that's one working group of the CSFD. And 2 years ago, we created a report. We call it the Civil Quality Standards for Civil Society Involvement. That's a guiding document for both civil society and governments about how to involve civil society in a meaningful way. We created a structure, like steps of the involvement, and also 9 overarching quality criteria about the meaningfulness of civil society involvement, which is transparency, balance, timeliness, approachability, competence, openness, trustfulness, autonomy, sustainability, and relevance. And we try to use this tool to assess the situation in individual countries. So how meaningful is the involvement of civil society in drug policies? And before we had only quantitative surveys, but they had limited information about what's really happening on the ground and what people really, how they really perceive the meaningfulness. So we decided to have a qualitative study in these 4 selected countries to represent north, south, different kinds of drug policy models. And in each country we created 2 focus groups. One for the decision makers, the other one for civil society members, and we structured the discussion around the 9 overarching quality criteria. First we mapped the structures of decision making and civil society involvement in each of these countries, And for example, in Finland, there is no real formal mechanism to involve civil society, like no institutional mechanism. There is a mechanism to coordinate drug policy, but civil society is not invited there. And actually, civil society itself started to create a platform where it can have some kind of dialogue with the government. So it's like kind of civil society developed itself its own informal structure to be included. In Ireland, I think in Ireland had the most advanced system of involving civil society with a national oversight committee, which includes representatives from civil society, and also they had a new experiment, the Citizens Assembly on Drug Use, which is a body where 99 citizens were randomly selected from the population to discuss various drug policy issues, and they make recommendations directly to the parliament. So that's an interesting precedent. And then in Greece, again, there is no real formal institutional mechanism, but the National Drug Coordinator has an advisory board, which includes one person from civil society, but actually, it's like no real formal inclusion of civil society again. And in Hungary, we had a formal system, a formal mechanism to include civil society before, but this system was kind of dismantled in the last couple of years, and there is an inactive body to include civil society which had no meetings in the previous 5 years. So there are different kind of structures in different countries. And about the findings on the quality of how civil society is included. As you saw, that there is only one formal mechanism with decision-making power, where civil society can sit at the table and participate in the real decisions made in drug policies. And in most countries, there is no real formal mechanism. And informal channels are more valued by civil society, actually, in most of the countries. It's like one participant said, informal behind-the-doors lobbying is the easiest way to achieve things in Greece. One example is the permission of naloxone distribution among people who use drugs. We also discussed transparency of these mechanisms, how transparent is decision-making, and in actually all countries, the civil society sees the decision-making not very transparent, let's say, so that formally, even if they formally involved, they don't really see how the decisions are made and based on what and who is making the decisions. It's mostly done behind the closed doors. And one representative from Finland said that the government does not want to make decision-making transparent because it would reveal that drug policies are not based on evidence. They don't want to be exposed. Then approachability of the government officials, so how approachable are they for civil society? So that's there are the gaps among the civil society organizations. So there are some organizations which are kind of privileged, so they have direct access to some government officials, while some, especially community organizations, are looked down and they are not speaking to as much. So it's as one representative from Ireland said, it's the difference is made by who is asking the question from the government. Then the competence, all the government representatives in this focus group said that they find civil society very competent when it comes to their own field professional issues, but they don't see them competent about how decision-making works and how civil servants operate. So that this kind of knowledge about how the public administration works is lacking from civil society. So, for example, one decision-maker said, what is lacking often is the understanding how policy-making works. We also asked about autonomy, how the autonomy of civil society organizations is respected, and this was the most tricky issue. So there were like very different attitudes in the group. So So there was one representative said, if you want to help vulnerable groups, you should put politics aside. We have a saying that don't look at the tree while losing the forest. This is exactly the case here, so that decision makers often see that civil society is kind of intruding into the land of policy making, politics, so that they are too political. At the same time, civil society saw that the governments don't respect the autonomy of civil society to criticize the government, because then they already seen as political. So one Irish representative government said, if you enter the political realm, it creates problems. You politicize issues that are debated by political parties, and this is a breach of trust. But one civil society representative said, we see that what decision makers write about us and the word they always use is political. It is the greatest term of insult to be political. You are an activist. We cannot have activists or on committees. This is what they say. And then what we documented in all countries, actually, which was surprising to me, was that in every country there's some kind of shrinking space for civil society. Even in like Finland, that people in civil society feel that the room and the space is decreasing for civil society. Just to wrap it up, then we had another criteria, sustainability, that there is no funding for advocacy, so that civil society organizations are not paid for the work they do in the consultation with the government. And the relevance, most of the decision makers feel that the involvement of civil society is very relevant. Civil society feels that their voice is not really heard. We made recommendations as well, and to each of the individual countries on how better involve civil society, and the report will come out soon on the website of Correlation. And I think we will have a session later in the afternoon, so if you are interested more discussion on this, thank you, and sorry for speaking.
No, that's excellent. Thank you, Peter. We're gonna keep moving straight into Graham's, actually. Hello. I didn't tell them who was going up next. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if it's clear.
How do we change?
You want to change them?
I need to change my glasses.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's just the next one. That's it. There we go. Thanks. So Graham is going to present on their work on harm reduction in prisons for Correlation.
I think everybody in here probably is aware that a large number or high proportion of people who use drugs end up in prison at some point in their lives, and often many, many times. And consequently, the issue of, how do people access health services within prison is a broad subject, and then within that, how they can access harm reduction services. And in discussion with Rafa and Katrin, I think some work has been done about this in the past, but now there's a new emphasis to see what can we do in Correlation to help partners throughout Europe. And the idea is to develop a toolkit or a toolbox in which partner organizations, NGOs, can seek assistance. And the assumption that I've made is that the partner organizations have no idea what to do. What are the first steps? So the assumption is you know nothing, even though you probably do. So what I've been doing over the last few months, first of all, a literature review to see what's written on the subject, of which there's not a great deal. Even internationally, there's not an awful lot, because of course it's a closed setting. I then looked at, for Europe, who are the key regional stakeholders working in the sector, and then which NGOs actually have some experience of delivering either health interventions or ideally harm reduction interventions within prisons, with the idea of gathering their experience to help inform how other NGOs around Europe can perhaps develop their own plan, and what lessons learned they can use to inform what they do. And then the idea is to develop a small working group, and I've suggested your input and input to get the user side, and then also European Harm Reduction Association, DPN SEA, based in Serbia, as well as Correlation. And then to develop a work plan for 2024 as to how to realize all of this information. But of course, with everything, depends on funding. So we'll be going around with a hat later. So for Module 1, the idea is to provide guidance, again, assuming an NGO has no idea what to do, but knows from the outreach work they do or drop-in center work that help in prisons is needed. And so we took the last or most recent partner survey, which is sent out to everybody, to see which organizations had an interest in harm reduction in prison, or those organizations that would like to deliver such services in the future. And we found 15 had indicated that. I'm not quite sure why it's not showing the bit underneath, but do we know, Rafa, why it's... I don't have a hard copy of... Oh, it's all right. And basically, out of the 15, of the 15, we sent out a very short SurveyMonkey list of questions. And this was asking some basic questions about, are you currently delivering any kind of services within prison? And if so, what kind of service, etc. Now, 10 of the 15 said they were interested in doing this, but didn't actually have any experience of it. So a lot of intention, goodwill. Of the other 5, there was only actually one organization. Oh, lovely, thanks. Yeah, 4 of the 15, or 27%, had direct experience in prison. But 3 of those 4 had stopped doing such work, largely due to lack of funding or lack of personnel. So we only actually have one partner out of the whole of Correlation with current experience in delivering services inside prison, which is a bit of a problem when you're trying to gather good practices. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so basically I had online discussions with the organizations with past experience, and I'm hoping to talk to the one that has current experience to try and gather, what are the key things to do in getting into prison without breaking the law. what I've also done is I've looked at two sources. One is the WHO Health in Prison European Database, called HYPED, and also a very good Institute for Crime and Justice Policy Research at Birkbeck College, University of London. And they publish online the World Prison Brief, which gives you a vast amount of information. And basically, I have been compiling for every country in Europe, and I mean every single one. There are 12 cells in San Marino, in case you're interested, but there's only one prisoner. With the idea that, you know, this could be a resource to identify from the WHO source which ministries are involved. You know, so you've got the overlap of justice, health, often interior, and then even if Ministry of Justice is in charge of the prison, the health service might be Ministry of Health. So it becomes very complex and a headache. And here we have the key findings. That the current experience is that basic health information is about as far as partners have gone so far. In terms of NSP, efforts have been made but failed, and throughout the world, you know, it's the same old issue of the prison authorities don't want to admit that there are so-called illicit activities happening inside their prison because it doesn't look good to senior politicians, etc. But maybe it's more of an informal arrangement that needs to happen in the future. And so the idea is that we will try somehow to develop a very basic first module on what the first steps to do actually are, and then to pilot that with interested partners if funding is available. And then the idea would then be to develop a second module on establishing basic health, and then to work from that into the harm reduction. Taking into consideration, you need time to develop the relationship with the head of the prison staff, you know, other ministry people, so that they trust you. But it's an incredibly difficult area to be working in. My past experience of trying to do this in Cambodia was extremely difficult when I worked with WHO. And I think it's going to take quite a bit of time. So if any of you are or know other people who are involved in prison work, please approach me, because I really need to find more experience, and I'm sure it's out there. I've heard in Spain, for example, there are some activities inside prison. So we're still really trying to gather as much data as we can.
Thanks. We have to stop there. That's great. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks very much. That's great, Graham. And basically harm reduction, trying to break into prisons, basically. The next person is Roberto. Roberto will present on their work on gender-sensitive services and on DCRs for correlation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for holding in there. I'll keep it very brief. I'm going to do a tiny bit of an overview of the work that we have been doing on drug consumption rooms, and then I'm going to be jumping a tiny bit on gender. So think of it a bit of some highlights of the work that we have been doing together. So I will just give a few of the hints. In the case of drug consumption rooms, also later at 4, there will be a session. So anybody that is interested in order to get more information and to know a bit more, please come. Also, my colleague Joanna will be presenting some preliminary results of the survey that she has been working very hard on. So come, support her. She's having really good information. For those who you might not know, Correlation was always hosting since 2007 the international network of drug consumption rooms, and in recent years it was identified that there was the need to do a bit more of a focus work on European level. So in the last couple of years, we have been doing quite some work into like formalizing and organizing what it could be like a European network of drug consumption rooms. And the idea is to support and to enhance the availability, the accessibility, and the quality of drug consumption rooms in Europe. Things, wait a second. Yeah, perfect. All things are funny in general today. So one of the things we were doing in 2023, together with actually many of you that you're in here, so you see people with drug consumption rooms, there's people of Gaia, we have also Aptes in there, we have Okana, we have some of you, you know who you are, and you will see them later in the session around. We were like busy in formalizing the network with the terms of reference. The terms of reference articulates a tiny bit of how we are working together and what is happening. And another important part that in the last meeting we were having is the launch of a calling for elections for a core group. And the idea to have a core group is to formalize and to also like give the possibility of networks to be more involved in the development of the action plans, of the activities they develop, and also in the direction that the network is having. Also this year has been important formalizing the cooperation and collaboration we have with the EMCDDA that mainly is structured around the following areas, which is joint publications. We have also networking and capacity building. For example, this year we were having a technical meeting of drug consumption rooms in Lisbon that we were co-organizing together with the EMCDDA. There is a whole line of work on monitoring, and the idea is to develop a set of minimal indicators that drug consumption rooms can be collecting in terms of drug trends and drug developments. And the last part is the development of guidance on how to implement and how to operationalize evaluation for drug consumption rooms, not only like the operation of drug consumption rooms and the process, but also the outcomes. And this is important not only for the drug consumption rooms themselves, but also because it's putting forward for the first time a common set of indicators that supports also advocacy when it comes to proving and to providing evidence in the effectiveness of drug consumption rooms, because now across all the drug consumption rooms they will be able to provide that sort of data. More things, advocacy has been another important part. I can imagine that probably Trixie is going to be speaking on how on the local advocacy network there was a whole consultation on drug consumption rooms. We have been also busy on different activities. In here, for example, it was recently in issue. We were having like the Global Commission on Drug Policy session. They're in issue with some of you. Also, Ares Dopinale was joining us, and Marie was also around. This is another example in the International Drug Consumption Rules Symposiums in the Council of Europe. This is a particular session that we were organizing. This one, it was Abede was part of this. Also, we had Ares Dopinale was participating. We, like several people, providing different models. For us, has been important into understanding that drug consumption rooms can have many forms. They don't need to be only like a health center, more hospital looking like. Also they can be in communities, they can be in housing, they can be in many different places. And we have continued with the capacity building. In previous years there has been a lot of effort that we have been doing into gathering resources for the establishment of safe consumption spaces together with the members of the network. This is a publication in which a lot of information is already published in there, and activating it this year we have been piloting implementation of trainings for organizations either wanting to operate a drug consumption room or already doing it. So if you also want more information about this, we have Kacha from Slovenia. We're doing a training for the opening of a drug consumption room in Ljubljana and Nova Gorica. And then very recently, a couple of weeks ago, my colleague Ari has been working a lot on that. You can ask Ari a lot about the trainings. Has been about Podane Ruche has very recently opened a mobile drug consumption room. So we're like supporting on how to continue improving and mobilizing this. I'm done. Good, man.
Thank you so much, Roberto. We're going to keep an good stuff. You can take a seat.
Yes.
Going to ask Beatrix to take the podium now, but start thinking about questions, because I think to get us off to lunch on time, I'm going to open it to the floor when Beatrix is finished. Okay, so over to you, Beatrix. And Beatrix will present on their work on advocacy activities for correlation.
Yeah, thank you, and hello everyone. I don't have slides, but the thanks is looking great up there. Just to frame the activities, I thought I would introduce the network that I represent today. It's an organization called Unite Parliamentarians Network for Global Health, and we are a network of elected officials from all levels of government. Most of our members are members of national parliaments, and they are all interested in public health policies. They come to the network to exchange experiences with each other, learn from each other, and learn from best practices in other countries and promote that. And within that, we have our drug policy work that I have the pleasure to coordinate, and we work with policymakers who are dedicated to harm reduction issues. But always the framing is that we seek to collaborate with the scientific community and civil society networks, and that's how this collaboration this year with Correlation has came about. Because there's been a clear need within the network to understand the issues and barriers in advocacy, and to look at how we could mobilize a harm reduction advocacy network. So we conducted a few activities this year to better understand these needs, also better understand the barriers in access to services for people who use drugs, but particularly looking at the barriers in advocacy, and collect some of the successful initiatives and use that to inform a future harm reduction advocacy network. So the activities were running in parallel and also building on the other activities developed by Correlation this year, particularly consultations with all of you to understand what the issues in advocacy have been and what has worked, and what we should be focusing on. So just to very quickly highlight a few points, and most of this I think is going to be unsurprising to most of you, in that the barriers to access to services and the barriers to advocacy largely overlap, and these are mainly the persistent stigma and discrimination, the unsupportive legal frameworks, also in countries or contexts where drug policies are relatively okay, we see issues like immigration laws or child protection laws, or it's been mentioned a few times already today, legislation restricting civil society space, all affects advocacy efforts. And then finally here, funding, which is linked in a multiple ways, particularly capacity, staff capacity, but also as Péter has also mentioned earlier, advocacy tends to be, especially advising governments for advocates, tends to be largely unpaid work. So particularly looking at advocacy, kind of zooming in on these three factors, what we see as a struggle in harm reduction advocacy is a lack of political prioritization to pursue harm reduction approaches, but at the same time there's again an increased politicization of drug use, and especially public drug use. Again, already today, there's been a lot of mention of sensationalized media reports about new drug trends, also public drug use. So it creates a very polarized atmosphere where these issues are very difficult to raise. But also what has emerged in a lot of the consultations is that this has given rise to a lot of also local vigilantism. There's quite a bit of concern in the public about public order and safety, and frustration about a lack of response from central government. And these conditions are also exacerbated by, again, issues that have already been mentioned: lack of understanding of harm reduction messaging, a lack of coordination and transparency between different stakeholders, and within that we see a lack of coordination within among different facets of civil society. So, for example, we were looking at migration and drug use, and there tends to be a lack of coordination between civil society organizations working with refugees and migrants, and those working on harm reduction and drug-related issues. And a big point that came out is a very unclear division of powers between different levels of governance that makes it very difficult for advocates to identify who to talk to, what to say, at what point to engage in the policy process. And yeah, these are all points that it was identified that more understanding is needed, but we've also seen quite a few successful initiatives or positive and facilitating factors to advocacy, and a clear one of those is the existence and empowerment of peer networks locally, nationally, and regionally to inform policymaking. Also, as Péter was mentioning, civil society involvement, but sort of how we achieve that seems to be to focus on the local approach, focus on the local community, and build from the bottom up and share these experiences. One of these is collaborating nationally, so across different organizations working nationally to share skills, but sometimes just to be there and support each other, for example, visible actions and protests. And then from the national move to the regional, share experiences on the regional level like we're doing right now, and collect this information. And then the final point is maintaining stakeholder networks or establishing them, formal ones and informal ones. Again, Péter's presentation mentioned some of the formal structures that exist in some countries to involve different stakeholders in the development of policies. But also in the consultations, it has emerged that informal relationships. So, for example, in the case of drug consumption rooms, establishing close relationships with the neighborhood, people living in the area, business owners in the area, and constantly keeping them informed about the work that's being done and the impact seems to be working. And then finally, it's looking at allies, particularly within the policy making fields, like networks like ours, but also we see initiatives of, for example, mayors in different European cities coming together to discuss about establishing different harm reduction initiatives. So as we see those happening, it's very interesting to look at how we can make sure that civil society and community voices are also channeled in those discussions between policymakers.
Thanks, Beatrix. Thank you. Thanks very much. I forgot one more presentation, a very important one about inclusion and diversity. That Roberto will take us through. If you can try to stick to 5 minutes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm back. So, to keep people engaged and interesting, we are looking for the last one. We keep all the gender, sex, and drugs for the end. So it is important for you to know, okay, it's a tiny bit moved, that in the last year also there has been some activities that has been done on the realm of gender, sexuality within the network, together with you and so many other partners. As you all are quite aware, despite the fact that there are marked differences between men and women and people of diverse genders, sexual orientations, and sex characteristics when it comes to who use and health outcomes of drugs, still there is less attention that has been offered to access to care and support, including the need for gender competent, cultural safe, and trauma-informed care. And this is particularly important for the people of diverse gender identities, sexual characteristics, and sexual orientation. And in the times in which what we are noticing is in the moments that there is an attention to a gender dimension, oftentimes we are seeing that gender is conflated for women and girls. So we are seeing that actually there's a lot of lack of attention and of data for trans and non-binary people. And we are also seeing that particularly racialized women and trans women are differentially affected by drug-related risk and harms compared with the other ones. So we started doing some activities this year. One of them is in 2023, February, we were starting the development of a background paper on gender transformative approaches. And I'm mentioning gender transformative because we see that there is a lot of attention to gender sensitivity, but not gender transformation, particularly without the context that actually are generating experiences of vulnerability, and that's something that from the network we find is important, considering changes that are happening on many different levels. And then with this, we have been working with some of you. There has been pioneers on the work that has been doing, like Medicineres has been supporting, there has been Abre has been supporting, there's many organizations coming, but also we have been starting to look into smaller organizations that they are doing work with this, and they are still not part of our collaborations. An example is Trans Harm Reduction Ireland, and there is many other organizations bringing them together. Also, we had the opportunity for the first time to develop an online chemsex multilingual training program. We were like reviewing the content and supporting with dissemination activities happening around this. And then we had the opportunity, for example, to collaborate with some organizations. I'm mentioning again Medicineres, but also GAT, in the 3rd International Drug Consumption Rooms Symposium, and start to implement within drug consumption rooms a gender dimension. How do we do this? How do we work with this? Because we see that at the moment accessibility of women, trans, and non-binary people to these services is lacking. Lastly, we have been also establishing more on the networking and the advocacy. Very recently, we have been starting to cooperate with the Council of Europe, the Gender Identity and Sexuality Unit, and we had the possibility to contribute to an event called Elevating Mental Health and Care for LGBTQ people in Europe. And this was particularly important because the invitation was to reflect through the lens of gender, sexuality, mental health, and substance use, which up until now, it was not included in their agendas. And then another series of webinars, which all will have access to the recordings and things around, and I'll keep it because you're looking at me like that's time. If you have my questions, you will see me. I'm the person in yellow. You can come, and I can answer things. Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you. So I know we've gone through a lot of information there, and I know it's almost lunchtime, but can you put your hands up if you have any questions, please? Really? Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there. I know, I can tell by the energy in the room is good, but people want their lunch. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for taking the time. I went over the 5-minute allocations because I knew you'd all put your work in, and thank you for putting the effort in. Have lunch now. Well done.